Did you just have a wrist or hand injury in Jiu Jitsu? Well, welcome to the club. Hey, before you even get started with this content, make sure you download our free low back pain relief guide. It's a completely free guide and it's gonna help you with your low back pain. Let's get into it. Hey guys, it's Dr. Josh. Today's episode is going to be a little bit about wrist injuries, hand injuries, and how you can start strengthening and things you need to start thinking about when it comes to jiu-jitsu. Whether this is gi or no gi, it doesn't necessarily matter, but there are a few different ways that we get injured in jiu-jitsu. And when we come across jiu-jitsu and wrestling and grappling in general, one of the biggest ways that we get injured, number one, is through falls and takedowns, right? So if we're going to some sort of throw, maybe we post our hand, maybe we hyperextend, maybe we roll our hand or something like that. Maybe we land a little awkwardly on the mat. This is a really common way to sprain or hurt our wrist. Another major way we hurt our hands and fingers in jiu-jitsu is more common in the gi when we're excessively grabbing a cross collar, when we're grabbing a sleeve or something like that, and somebody pulls back extremely hard. Or what we do, sometimes we get our hand or our fingers caught into our fabric, and that can cause some other issues. So there's a reason why we don't grab the inside of the pant grip, is because that can be very powerful. Somebody can kick away and you can kind of get your hand caught up and really hurt yourself that direction. So anytime you're grabbing a grip, one of the things you need to really focus on is a good secure grip, but also knowing when to let go. Another common way that people get injured with jiu-jitsu, and specifically with wrists, are wrist locks, right? There's wrist locks going this direction and going this direction, and they come on quick, okay? So sometimes it is too late, and when I get into a wrist lock or somebody gets me into a wrist lock, I kind of let them play with it a little bit, but then I tap real fast. So just getting that type of direction or directional force onto your wrist can cause a lot of catastrophic damage. You can have breaks, you can have fractures, you can have a lot of sprains within the small ligaments within the carpal bone. So something to watch out for. Of course, another way a lot of people get injured is by when they grasp other people's hands. So when people kind of grab your hands, maybe they're defending a choke. Some people who are inexperienced or not necessarily watching out for you will peel your fingers away. And of course that is incorrect, but you know, that happens at times also. In addition to that, Kimura traps. I love Kimura traps. It's when you reinforce your grip, but those people who are not necessarily looking to get out of there with technique, they're looking to kind of bail out as a last ditch effort, will explode up like that. And I know a few people who have actually done that. They've gotten a nice Kimura trap, they've reached over and the other person kind of extends or explodes out of it, or they will shrimp back into you extremely hard, and that'll hyperextend your wrist. And I have actually seen black belts at a higher level break and need surgery on their wrist as a result of that. So, you know, it's also very important to know who you're rolling with, how you're rolling with them, and understand that if you are doing Kimura traps, there's going to be a time where you may need to let go. Finally, another major way that a lot of people get injured in jiu-jitsu is from their frames. So when they're framing, maybe a guy or a gal sits up on you, or they sit out into like a judo position and stuff like that. Sometimes our hands get caught underneath their hips over here, and as they move their hips over, it almost kind of wrist locks their own hand. And so that's another major way that a lot of people get injured in jiu-jitsu when it comes to their hands and fingers. So now that we know how the wrist often gets injured in jiu-jitsu, well, what do we need to know about the anatomy, the physiology, and things like that to understand how to strengthen it? So first, there are basically a few directions or 6 degrees of motion that we need to know. There's flexion, just like this, so we're flexing our forearms. Then there's extension, and then there is supination, pronation, and really not talked about, there's ulnar and radial deviation. So what that looks like is ulnar deviation and radial deviation, right? So we're kind of going side to side like this. And this is really important because if we're feeding on the lapel and we're trying to choke, we don't always do this. We kind of do this and then we kind of pull that wrist around. So also really important for throws, we're not just gonna pull the person through. Here we're gonna pull and we're gonna deviate our wrist. So knowing that we have 6 degrees of motion, they're going to be utilized in different facets. So if you just hurt your wrist, you have to focus on 1 or 2 ranges of motion at the beginning. And if you're looking to strengthen your wrist, you have to focus on that as well. So after you hurt your wrist, or the first thing that you should be focusing on really is just maintaining ranges of motion that are comfortable and non-painful. And I understand that if you are new to this injury, meaning you just hurt it, getting that hand or that finger strength back might take a little bit, and wrist injuries, in my experience, they tend to linger around because of the carpal bones. So what I like to do is, it doesn't necessarily matter how hard you're squeezing, it just matters that you have some sort of grip strength. So what you can do is just place your arm down to the side like this and squeeze just some sort of ball here, like a stress ball, and just start with that. You can hold for 30 seconds, you can do repetitions, but what we're going to do is we're going to be very systematic in our approach, okay? What I like to do, and with every single one of my patients who is a jiu-jitsu athlete who hurts their wrist, the first thing we do is just develop neutral grip strength. And what does that mean? It means this, okay? It doesn't matter here or here, we're going to have neutral grip strength first. As we build that base foundation from neutral grip, we can start increasing to supination, pronation, flexion, extension, and all those other motions that we just talked about before. So the next movement that I typically like my patients to get into when it comes to wrist strengthening and grip strengthening is going to be a neutral grip dead hang. So on a pull-up bar, a lot of times we'll do this. That's okay as long as the bars aren't slanted or anything like that, or angled where you're kind of like in this weird position. We want a neutral grip here or a neutral grip here. We don't want to be deviating our wrists at that time. So the first thing I would like to have you do is start out with, depending on your strength and the severity of the injury, start out with 3 sets of 30 seconds and move on from there, from that dead hang. If you don't have access to a pull-up bar with a neutral grip at this point in time, what you could simply do, depending on the strength that you have and what you can do, is you can pick up a dumbbell or a kettlebell and just simply hold it at your side. Be careful that you don't walk with it. And it may seem a little counterintuitive that you're not walking with it, because I really love farmers walks and stuff like that. But the issue is that when you walk, there is a little bit of shearing effect that can happen. And so just holding that neutral grip just like this is going to be really, really important. One small little exercise that you can do that a lot of people don't really focus on are the small little musculature within the hand, the intrinsic hand muscles called the lumbricals. And what they basically do is stabilize the hand grips. And what we can do is go through these general ranges of motion. So we're gonna basically come here, and this might be good for somebody like you who is maybe getting out of pain to begin with, but not necessarily strong enough to go through the ranges of motion. So we can isolate the wrist in their hand and try not to bend the fingers, right? We're trying to create like a board. So you can tell that this one needs a little bit more strength. And so we're gonna come in here and we're gonna do this over and over. We might do 10 or 15 reps on each side just to get that strength in there, and then kind of repeat over and over for multiple sets. And this is a great, again, warm up, as well as a good isolation exercise for the intrinsic muscles of the hand, so that you can get that hand as well as that wrist strong. Also, another really important exercise is as you start to develop those strength patterns and you get really strong and neutral, you may have to back off and then do some sort of wrist curls in flexion and then into extension. One of the best ways to do that is through just lightweight. Support your wrist on a bench or some sort of flat surface and do very lightweight extension, going to neutral, coming back up through extension, and going back and forth. Then you can also flip over and do flexion-based exercises. Again, you shouldn't have pain or any discomfort with these exercises. I know it may be sore the next day, but soreness is different than pain. So now that you've maybe restored a little bit of your flexion and a little bit of your extension, I also like to then go to supination and pronation. So what we can simply do is grab a hammer, we can grab a light weight, we can do something like this. So we can support our wrist going into pronation, and then we can do supination. And for this reason alone, this is one reason why I really like to work isolation of doing some sort of curls, because yes, we do build the bicep, which is important for the strength in our shoulder as well as our elbow, but it also helps supination. And if we can tolerate supination, that's going to help our grip strength. So as we maybe play a lasso, or we kind of have to pull somebody in going across, we need to have that real quality supination when it comes to our wrist. So we can't just work the wrist, we have to work the wrist, the hand, the forearm, the shoulder, and all the way up the chain, okay? So can't just focus on the wrist, we have to help other supporting aspects of that musculature to help wrist and forearm strength. So now that you've reached the point within a few weeks, maybe you're able to dead hang for several sets of 30 seconds, maybe you're increasing the time, there's no pain, now you can do some flexions, now you can do some extensions, you're getting into supination and pronation. The very next thing we would start doing is ulnar deviation and radial deviation. And this is as simple as you can hold your wrist at the edge of a table and you can kind of support yourself and hold a hammer. You can hold some sort of weight. You can go forward and backwards. There's also many different ways that I can show you on how to strengthen with ulnar deviation and radial deviation. But what I really like to do with all my movements is isolate them as best as possible and then branch them into a multi-directional approach. What does that mean? It means that we're going to be doing other exercises that mimic different movements at the same time, but at the beginning of an injury, I really like to isolate as best as I can so that this way I can move with confidence into the next movement pattern. So while you're gaining your strength back, it's also really important that you get into range of motion, which is controlled articular rotation, so CARs. So what we can do here is we can do this with two hands. We can go into flexion, we can go out to the side, we can go to extension, we can extend the fingers, we can extend the hand, and we would do this type of exercise likely as a warm-up to our exercises or our rehab programs. And then we can come here. We can even isolate the joint with one hand if we need to. So just getting into these ranges of motion are going to be really important, as well as therapeutic to help that movement pattern. So now that we've gone through all of our ranges of motion, we've isolated them, we're starting to gain strength, we need to bring it together to a more complex movement. One of those more complex movements are rope hangs or inverted towel hangs. So basically you're going to be hanging upside from a bar and we can just be holding that. What that's going to do is work on your grip strength, it's going to work on some deviation, it's going to help work on supination, pronation patterns, and you could even do them supinated, pronated, neutral grip, and we can do things like that. And then from there, once you get strong enough, you could do rows and do max rep rows so that you can really gain your strength as well. So how to put this all together? The first thing you're going to do is start strengthening in a neutral grip, whether that is down at your side or hanging from a neutral grip pull-up bar for a duration or time. From that point in time, then you could start moving on to flexion, extension, supination, pronation, then ulnar and radial deviation, and isolating each one. In the meantime, you're going to do controlled articular rotations, some sort of lumbrical moves, then you're gonna do even lumbrical holds, and then you're gonna move on from that point in time. Now, this may take a few weeks, it may take 4 to 6 weeks to get over this injury, but then from there, you'll start developing from a modified towel hold or rope hold, then you'll go to an inverted hold, then you can work on grip strengthening from different aspects. So it can go here and go here and go here, rock climbing grips, all these different types of grips and grip strengthening techniques that you can do. And again, you don't necessarily need all this type of equipment to get it done. You just need a few different things, some lightweight, some bands, and somewhere to hold, as well as a towel or a rope. That's basically all you really need to begin with. Again, this is a great way to start implementing grip strengthening to prevent injuries, finger injuries, wrist injuries in jiu-jitsu. So that's it for this episode. I hope you heal up really well, and I hope you start strengthening up your wrists so that you can get back to jiu-jitsu and prevent some of these hand and wrist injuries in the future. Thanks again for watching. Before you leave, make sure you subscribe to our channel. If you want more information and if you need more hand and grip strengthening exercises, please comment below so we can make another video, and I will see you for the next episode. Us.